Welcome to Successfully Ambiguous. I'm Christine Brooks-Cappadocia. I'm so excited to introduce you to Laura Babcock. She runs her own nationally listened to podcast that covers political affairs. She's a commentator on various media outlets. She runs a communications firm. Today we reflect on the value of relationships on business, the ability to jump in and learn new things, saying yes and then figuring it out. So let's meet Laura. Early on, I reached out to you despite not really knowing you and asked you for help organizing a major event. I had almost no budget, no time, very little support. And you said yes. What made you take a leap on like that with someone you barely knew? And what does that say about the way you approach relationships and trust?
It's a great question, and it's such a pleasure to be speaking with you in this format, Christine. I wanted to do it because when I look at relationships, I look at it in terms of value. If you have shared values, you see the true value in the human that you're talking to, because business is about relationships. It's not, to me, it's never been about transactional sales. So I have to see the person, and then I have to also look at myself and say, what do I bring to that relationship? It can't be a one-way thing. It has to be an ongoing proposition of value.
You've spent years helping leaders communicate in high stakes and even crisis situations. What's one lesson from those moments?
Whether I'm walking into a boardroom where they're in a crisis, or whether I'm walking in to do an engaging leadership communication session with an executive or a manager, I first want to know who I'm sitting with and how they're feeling about that moment, right? Because in crisis management, if they are not at a place where they can be thinking with their frontal lobe instead of their lizard reaction brain, then I can't move them to the solution-based thinking, right? We'll stay too long in the issue identification because that feels scary. I'm a big fan of metacognition. How am I thinking about my thoughts? And then what I try to do is I try to help people move from what they're thinking about their thoughts, that awareness, to what I call metacognitive repositioning, which is, okay, but now how do we need to think in order to do the next step, whether it's handle a crisis or handle an opportunity in leadership or public speaking or media? Essentially, it's an internal conversation. How do I feel? What am I saying to myself internally? And then I can externalize.
That makes a lot of sense. So is the work changing as executives are, getting younger, and a lot of the new executives have grown up in the age of social media where there are times in high school or university might actually be publicly available on the internet now. How do you keep people who are used to being very public, how do you help them adopt some of that distance that you need to do to be able to represent your organization and do that job?
I think you have to stay authentic. Oftentimes, they're much more diverse in terms of backgrounds, which is fabulous. So they have a host of other challenges they're navigating, opportunities, experiences they have, values they bring to the table that other people don't have, that I'm learning as I'm sitting with them. I'm privileged to learn from them. But it's different, right? Every generation has a different context, a different frame of reference. Understanding their frame of reference really well, helping them to understand it really well, and then within whatever that context is, saying, okay, so what are your strengths? What are what can we take of your different experience and bring it to leadership, as opposed to saying, here's how to be a leader from the 90s, or here's how to look like a leader from 2010. Leadership is about the best extension of yourself. That's why you're a leader, is that people want to follow, right?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. If they wanted somebody that was a cookie cutter approach, they wouldn't have chosen most of the people who are leading organizations, right? They're
That's right.
looking for people who bring authentic values and
Right.
experiences. So speaking of that, you have a private company, but you also have a rather public role as a media commentator, and you run a show that's been quite successful, a national political affairs show. I'm seeing a lot of really high profile guests come on that I can't imagine you've just crossed over in the street, run into in the street, but maybe. Um, you've had heads of national parties on,
Yeah.
international guests from, there was a guy I was watching from, I think, Finland the other day. How do you go about building those relationships where there's perhaps a difference of geography or access to power?
Great question. I watch people intently, as you can imagine, and I pay attention to their developing public narrative. And if they are informing my world by their commentary, if I find them to be insightful, if I find them to be of value to my audience and my conversation that I'm trying to advance with the audience, then I simply comment on what they're talking about, and then they tend to follow me, and then I have access to their private DMs. And then I approach them and ask if they want to be on the show. Most say yes. And then I get this wonderful cadre of people who bring everything from, Arlene Dickinson talking about Canada's position in business, and just watching her as a thought leader in this country, to Lars. Well, you're talking about Joni from Finland, but also I'm going to reach out to my friend Lars in Denmark to talk around NATO issues in Greenland. Depending on what I want to talk around the pro-democracy conversation, because the OShow is now Canada's pro-democracy podcast, and we're heard in 112 countries, and as well as our YouTube audience. And so I think, what is important to Canadians in advancing the pro-democracy conversation? Who do I want to talk to about that? So it can be anybody, and it's just about, do they bring value to the audience? And in that case, can I approach them? And if they want to bring value to the audience, then we do. And often relationships establish, and now I have a wonderful group of guests who want to come back on the program, but I'm always constantly looking. There's an emergency room doctor in Toronto that I've been following on social, and he's going to come on and talk about hallway healthcare, and so it's, as I'm observing people, Christine, I think, will my audience get value from this conversation? So yeah, you never know who's going to be on the O Show.
It's interesting. We have a very similar approach to building content programs at the school, where we look to, what are the big labor market gaps, and then we go find people who are working in those fields, who are leaders in those fields, and we ask them to contribute. If I could leave listeners with a piece of advice, it would be ask. You never know who's going to say yes. And
Absolutely.
if you align on those values and build the relationship, look to add reciprocal value, it people say yes, and you learn so many neat, wonderful things from them.
I never planned on starting a public relations firm. I was a journalist, a television journalist, and had a car accident. And while I was recovering, saw in the paper a job to run a not-for-profit to help, with injuries. And I didn't check all the boxes at all. But I thought, well, what can I bring to this conversation? I had recent experience, I had a vision. And so I started running a not-for-profit, and not soon after, a Chamber of Commerce asked if I would come and lead it. And again, not having the background particularly, but I did believe in the skill set that I had. People were coming to me going, can we hire you for this, that, and the other thing in communications? So I started my communications firm 25 plus years ago, Power Group. I think a lot of times with career paths, it's about following not just your passion, but developing your expertise, right? And developing a brand. And my brand has been one of, you can trust that I'll get it done. And you know that I'll put everything into it. And I care deeply about my clients. And most of my clients have been my clients multiple times over the last 25 years. Because when people know you're invested in them, and when people understand that you have their best outcomes as your best outcomes, my career path has been a winding one, but it's based on doing what I love, which is to listen to people, to communicate, to advance a narrative, right? And if you can find what you love and build those relationships, that's how they become sustainable.
Oh, absolutely. And I've learned something new about you after all the years we've known each other. I didn't know much about how you entered the world of communications before Power Group. I think there's something really important about that. Women and people from equity deserving groups often don't jump in unless they have, 100% of the or 99% of the boxes ticked on an opportunity. And there's something to be said for just jumping in and learning as you go. There are ways to develop skill sets as you grow in a role.
I absolutely am guilty of having leapt first into just about every opportunity. So much so that, I'm scrambling to find out what the job title means as I'm going into the interview, right? Because again, I know who I am and I know what I can bring when I'm invested and when I believe in the values and the outcomes of who I'm working with and when I believe in the person. And so for for many of my career changes, it has been more about somebody saying, you should do this job. It's available now. I could recommend you, and me going, really? All right, let's see how that rolls. There is value to just not just jumping in, but telling people you're doing it. And then there's an accountability there, right? To
Yeah.
results.
Oh, absolutely, right. The job I met you in was I'd taken a role as a digital marketer and then had to go home and Google. I'd actually accepted the position and had to go home and Google what is digital marketing. And I've never looked back, right? Some of the best things you do jump in and then you go, okay, we'll figure it out. Well, and that's where innovation comes from, right? Is just figuring it out.
Yeah.
Um, so based on your experience, and I know you're now taking the show international
Yeah.
with some work with Midas.
Yeah, Mighty
Um,
Canada, yeah.
yeah, so you've been known for jumping in. You're known for building really strong relationships. If you could leave listeners with a piece of advice, what would it be?
Don't assume you know what the future offers. Don't assume that you've figured out all the possibilities because truly it's organic and they grow. The universe is ever expanding. So we don't know what we can do or what opportunities will come to us. You just have to get good at what you do, get good at what you love, and be open to new experiences and really work on that internal dialogue of metacognition and repositioning and say to yourself, okay, I might not be, ready for this or ready for that in theory, but that's just theoretical. I know who I am. I know what I can do. I know why this matters to me. And I'm going to go out there and I'm going to crush it. And I'm going to love it while I'm doing it. And people are attracted to that energy. They're attracted to that optimism. They're attracted to that confidence. And so get that internal dialogue going, and you can pretty much do anything you want to do or anything that you want to try. But it really comes down to believing in yourself. And if you don't initially, because we all have insecurities, it's about saying, why do I feel this way? Let me deconstruct that. What is that false expectation appearing real, that fear? And how do I move that over into a confident positioning for this moment that will get me through the moment? And then, the moment builds on itself. And that would be my best advice. Think about what you're thinking about, change what you're thinking about so that you can hit the moment you need to when you need to.
And if I could just add as we're wrapping up, but add to that the friends you meet along the way and the relationships you build with people who share your values so you can have fun on the journey.
Oh, 100%. I can't have fun working with somebody I don't enjoy or respect.
And it's about those values, right? People you like who share your values and build something that adds value together.
Yeah, it's
So
fabulous.
thank you. Speaking of value, thank you so much for coming on the show. And for listeners who don't know, Laura is the executive producer of this podcast. So this is a labor of love we're working on together to help everybody successfully navigate these unpredictable career times.
Selfishly, I love just listening to all of our guests give advice. I feel like I'm doing a mini MBA or something every time I listen. It's like the access to knowledge and experience and wisdom. It's a huge value. So that's a perfect example. We get value out of it as we're working together and hopefully giving value to the audience and even to the guests that come on the show. So thank you, Christine. It's lovely to work with you and to be part of Successfully Ambiguous on this side of the camera.
Oh, I much appreciate it. So, listeners, please, if you haven't subscribed yet, subscribe. Let's help build this community.
Absolutely.
We can help others too.
Thank you for joining me for this episode of Successfully Ambiguous. Be sure and subscribe to us on YouTube and listen to us on Apple and Spotify. If you've got career questions, be sure to email me at successfullyambiguous@yorku.ca. Don't forget, when opportunity knocks, be ready to answer.